His genuine
I've
care
talked
and
on
interest in their
numerous
well-being
occasions
have made him a beloved figure in our home.
and
we
have
often
discussed our mutual
refer to
Christian
him as
faith.
Uncle Corey.
We've shared
Despite
scripture.
not being related by
We've
blood.
shared prayer
Corey's character
and lessons learned from this
is
scripture.
one of generosity,
And I know
acts of
through this
kindness,
faith,
and a strong sense of responsibility
Corey will
towards his
live a
family,
full
friends,
life,
and community.
a life
He
full
has
of purpose.
consistently demonstrated his commitment
And he
to
has a
making
willingness
positive
to help
impact,
others
and his
find their own
contributions
purpose.
have left a lasting mark on the lives of many, especially my family. I
Thank you,
respectfully
Judge, for letting me
request
speak.
that you consider my
And
testimony
I ask
when
that you take the
determining
words that
Corey's
I've said into
sentence. I
consideration in
firmly
Corey's
believe that
sentencing
his
today.
actions and genuine goodwill he has shown throughout the years are a testament
next we
to
have,
his character.
Rich Chiavello.
I kindly ask you for your leniency, mercy, and grace in this matter.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
I believe Corey's positive
My name is
qualities
Rich
should be
Chiavello.
weighed during the sentencing process.
Thank you for the opportunity to give me
Thank you, Judge Newman,
chance
for
to
allowing
speak.
me to speak.
on behalf of my friend Corey Fleming.
Next, Your
I
Honor,
met
is
Corey
Lisa
22 years
O'Brien.
ago when we both became new parents. A couple years later, we both welcomed our second
Good
child.
afternoon, Judge. I am Lisa
children.
O'Brien.
Over the
and,
years,
I'm a
My family
Beaufort
and I became very close
resident,
friends.
born
with
and
Corey,
raised here.
his
I met
parents, his
Corey
wife, his
and
children.
his wife and children at the
We
Y.
spent many
I taught spin there for about
holidays,
16 years,
birthdays,
and he and his family
and
actively
weekends
participated
together.
in my classes. In 2011,
He's the
our
last person that I
oldest
ever thought I'd be
son
standing
was
here
brutally
talking
attacked
to you about
and
today.
beaten and robbed in his home in the
I've
middle of
only
the
known
night
Corey
here in
to
Port
be a
Royal.
loving son, husband, father, and friend.
I didn't ask for help, but Corey knew
I believe
my
Corey-
anger outside
I also believe
after
That
class
when he returns to his family
and told
and
me
friends,
that
he will dedicate his life
he and his wife
to earn
would
the
do
respect,
anything to
trust,
help
and
us
admiration
through
of
this
all who come to know him.
process. Even though the prosecutor would take control,
Your Honor, I ask
he
that
would
you
be
show
there
Corey
for
as much
us.
leniency and mercy as the court will allow.
he spent countless hours talking to us over the phone and in person and just helping us to understand what we were going to face. I've stood in one of these courtrooms at least 5 times as the mother of a victim. Each time Corey has put himself out
Or had me to read
to be
before.
there for our family without anything asked or without any bragging or patting himself on the back for being a
You know,
good
you
person.
submitted them all to
In
me
one of my
to read,
conversations
and I've
with
read them.
Corey at the Y,
So I don't need you
he
to
told me that one of the hardest
read them
things he
again
had
if
to
you've already
do
done that.
was to stand in the
Another
courtroom
from the same
while
person?
people that didn't have an attorney didn't know what to say, when he could easily go up there and help them. And every day it was hard for him. And there's one more thing I want to mention. When all of this happened, we moved upstate a couple of years ago.
Your Honor,
And when all of this happened, I
grateful for
came
the
down and I
opportunity
wanted
to
to go
speak on
into
behalf
one of the
of my friend
classes and
Corey
see
Fleming.
my old friends.
I've had the privilege of
And
knowing Corey since
I
2009.
asked Corey if he
and I'm eager to
was going
share
to be there, and
my
he showed up.
insights about his character
And
and
I
the
told
positive
him, I
impact
said, "You know,
he has had with my family.
I'm not going to ask you
in our
anything about
community.
these things. I don't
I
want you to
first
feel
met Corey at the
pressure
YMCA.
to ever be around us."
Where our shared
And he
passion
stopped
for
me
competitive running and physical
in my
fitness brought us
tracks, and
together.
he said, "No."
Over the years, we
I
participated
have learned
in
from
numerous
this
local running
already
events,
things about myself.
forging
I
a
didn't
strong
even
bond
realize
based
I
on our
needed
shared
to know.
interests and values.
The
I've
remorse
had
was
the
clear,
opportunity to witness
and
firsthand Corey's
his
dedication
actions
to the
to
YMCA.
stop me
For the past
and
8
tell me
years, I've
that he
overseen
had
the
guilt
YMCA's River Swim,
are
a signature fundraiser
something
for
I
our
can't
Learn
even
to Swim
explain.
program.
I didn't ask
Corey,
him.
alongside
and he
his
just
daughter,
told me.
participated in the challenging
I
3.2
think
mile
what
swim.
I want to say
And when I
most
approached him
is,
for
I'm here on my
sponsorship
own accord.
In
I
support
drove 3.5
of the
hours to
Wise
come. I don't
cause,
feel
worthy
obligated.
cause, he didn't
I don't
hesitate.
feel like I have to be
In
here.
addition to
and
our
certainly
YMCA
I'm not
swim,
forced to be
I could always
here.
count on Corey to
I would
sponsor
stand up for
and actively
Corey
participate
in a minute
in a
and
running
Eve
event I
and his
chaired for
family.
the Parents Association
Because
of my son's school.
One thing
He
in
generously
somebody's life
extended
that
beyond
happens
financial
a couple of
contributions.
times does not
He
define
consistently went out of his way to help
He is
others.
more
I can
them. The
personally
whole picture of
attest to
who he
this.
is more than this, and this is terrible.
I'm a
This does
single
not
mother
define
to
him.
3 sons.
And I just ask for you to consider that.
Was the assailant
There have been times
There were 5 assailants,
Excuse
and they were apprehended
when I
the night
relied on
of the
Corey's
crime.
expertise to
They were caught
fix various household
by
issues.
Detective Rue,
He never hesitated to lend a hand.
and
One
it took
vivid
about 2
example
years to
is when my
prosecute.
outdoor shower
They did
pipe
all plead
froze
guilty.
and started
How much
spilling
time,
water
what was their
everywhere
sentence?
on Christmas morning.
It ranged from 15 years to 20 years.
Despite
for
the
all
holiday
5.
festivities, Corey was there to help at a moment's notice.
15
and without
years to 20
hesitation.
years each.
Yes,
Moreover,
sir.
Corey's
Well, each
unwavering
person
commitment
was
to his
sentenced
family
with
is
a,
truly commendable.
concurrent
Friends
burglary
with
in the
Corey,
first
but
degree.
also developing
Armed,
against Corey and his family
was
extended
20
their
years
kindness
for
to
one
me without
individual, and the armed
hesitation.
robbery 20,
Their
and
support
5 for the
and empathy
weapon.
served as a
And that
beacon of light
process matched
through my moments
each
of difficulty.
person down the line.
How old were
Corey
they?
has been a guiding figure
They ranged
in
in
the lives of my
ages from
sons.
23 was
He's
the
been a
oldest
mentor,
person.
providing them with
The
support,
youngest one was
advice,
about a month
an
from turning
empathetic ear
17,
when they needed
And
someone
what
to
year was that?
confide in.
2011.
His genuine
Are they
care
still
and
in
interest
prison?
in their well-being
Yes,
have
sir.
made him a
The
beloved
first one
figure in
will
our
be
home,
released next
and we
year.
often refer to him as Uncle Corey,
All right.
despite
you.
not being related by blood.
Your Honor, next we have Laura.
Corey's
Blue.
character is one of generosity, acts of kindness, and a strong
Good
sense of
afternoon, Your Honor.
responsibility towards his family,
My name
friends,
is Laura
and
Blue.
community. He has consistently demonstrated his commitment to making a
13
positive
years,
impact, and his
being in the
contributions have left a lasting
area,
mark on the lives of
a
many,
citizen
especially
of
my
Beaufort,
family.
South Carolina. I've known
I
Corey as being my
respectfully
landlord.
request that you consider my testimony when determining Corey's sentence. I firmly believe that his
Just
actions
so
and
much
genuine goodwill
could say about
he
this
has shown
man.
throughout the years are a
I have 2
testament
children.
to his character.
We were
I kindly
homeless,
ask
living in a
you for your
hotel.
leniency, mercy, and grace in this matter. I believe Corey's positive qualities should be weighed during the sentencing process. Thank you, Judge Newman, for allowing me to speak on behalf of my friends.
It was during
Next, Your
Christmas
Honor, is
time.
Lisa O'Brien.
We were transitioning from the hotel to
Good
the
afternoon,
residence
Judge.
in which he was
I am
allowing me
Lisa
to rent.
O'Brien, and I'm a Beaufort
And
resident, born and raised here.
when I went into the home,
I met Corey and his wife and children at the Y.
so much I can say about this man.
I taught spin there for about
He,
16
immediately
years, and he and his
shared with me that I
family
didn't have to do the
actively
first month rent
participated in my
and
classes.
Make sure I get my
In
kids some
2011,
Christmas.
our oldest son was brutally attacked
My son was
and beaten
7,
and
my
robbed
daughter
in his
was
home
9.
in the middle of the night here in Port Royal.
We've been in the home 13 years.
I didn't
My son
ask for
graduated
help,
from Beaufort High
but
School.
Corey knew
He's
my
not in the
anguish.
United
He
States
saw it on my
Navy.
face,
I have a
and he
22-year-old
approached me
daughter.
outside
She's currently
after class
the business manager
and told me
at
that
St. Helena in Port
he
Royal.
and his wife
I have
would
a
do
4-year-old
anything to help
grandchild
us
that
through this
actually came
process.
into the home
Even though the
while we were
prosecutor
there.
would take control, he would be
I
there
would say
for
from
us.
landlord to family, that's how we look at him.
He spent countless hours
Both of my children
talking to us
looks
over
at
the
him
phone
very highly as
and
an
in
uncle.
person, and just helping
He's
us
very
to
respected
understand
by
what we
both
were
of
going to
them.
face.
In
I've
spite
stood
of
in
what's
one of
going
these
on,
courtrooms at least 5
we
times
talked. I've
as
relocated
the
to
mother
Missouri,
of a victim.
so I flew in
Each
to
time
speak on
Corey
who he
has
is to us
put
as a family.
himself out
My
to
daughter
be there
spoke
for
at
our
the
family
federal,
without
and I
anything
will say this,
asked
Judge.
or without any bragging
During this
or
time,
patting himself on the
while I
back
was
for
in
being a
Missouri,
good person.
Corey and I
In one of my conversations with Corey at
talked,
the Y, he told me that one of the
tried to
hardest
encourage
things he
him
had to do
plenty nights
was to
through
stand in the
texting
courtroom
and sending
while
scriptures
people
to
that
let him
didn't have an
know
attorney
that in the Bible, God
didn't know
forgive
what
us
to
of
say
all our sins.
when he could easily go up there and help
He asked
them.
me when
And
I came
every
down
day
to
it was
visit
hard
my
for
family
him.
here, if it was
And there's one
possible
more
to
thing I
just
want to mention.
come by his home, he needed to share
When all of
something
this
with me.
happened, we
In
moved
spite of the
moved
media,
upstate a couple
in
of
spite
years
of people
ago.
around me,
And when all of
he
this
called
happened, I
me,
came
him
down
and his
and I
wife
wanted to go into
went to
one of
the
the
home.
classes and see
he talked
my
with
old
me, he shared
friends.
things. He didn't go in
And
depth or anything.
I asked
He just
Corey
let
if
me
he
know.
was going to be
He
there,
did something,
and
he was
showed
very
up.
sorry about it.
And
He
I
just
told
couldn't
him,
get over
I
the
said,
hump
you know,
of understanding that it has to
I'm not
be-
going to ask you
it has to
anything
go-
about
he
these
has to
things.
forgive
I don't
himself.
want you to feel pressured to
I
ever
will
be
tell you
around
today, Judge,
us.
on behalf of
And
my
he stopped
family,
me
we truly,
in my tracks,
truly,
and he said,
by no
no.
means look at him
I
more
have
than
learned
just
from
my
this
landlord.
already things
Again, he's
about
my
myself.
family.
I didn't even realize
I
I
rest
needed
assured
to
it's
know.
his family
The
has
remorse was
supported me
clear,
tremendously.
and
They didn't
his
ask me to come. They
actions to
didn't beg
stop
me.
me
I asked them,
and tell
can I
me
please
that
come?
he had
Can
guilt.
I please, every day,
Are
what can we do? Because
something
again,
I
like
can't even
say,
explain.
this man
I
took
didn't
my
ask
family
him,
in,
and he
put a
just
roof
told
over
me.
my head with 2 children.
I think
And
what
he made sure
I
not
want
one
to say
day if I
most
was late, he
is
overcharged
I'm here on my
me.
own
Not
accord.
one day he
I
made an
drove
eviction
3.5
notice or
hours to
anything. And
come.
I've been late
I
many
don't
of
feel
times.
obligated. I
Yet
don't
he let
feel
us
like I
stay in the
have to be
home.
here. And
He was ready
certainly,
to
I'm not
renovate the home
forced
right
to be
before my
here.
son was graduating.
I would stand up for Corey.
And I was working for
in
the
a
Department
minute,
of Social
and
Service
Eve
inside
and his
Child Protective
family,
Service as an investigator.
because
Not making much money. And
one
I
thing in
told him, I
somebody's
said,
life that
Mr.
happens
Fleming,
a
if
couple
we
of
leave, where
times
could we
does not
possibly go
define
for the
them.
next 3 months
He
until
is
my
more
son graduated?
the whole
He
picture
said,
of
you
who
know what,
he
you
is
guys stay here,
is more than
and when he
this.
graduates,
And this is
then we'll
terrible.
go ahead and start the
But
renovation
this
of the
does
home.
not define him.
So I just
And I
ask
just
that you
ask
just
for you to
take
consider that.
consideration what I said about this man. Thank you, Your Honor.
There were 5 assailants, and they were apprehended the night of the crime. They were caught by Detective Rue, and it took about 2 years to prosecute. They did all plead guilty.
How
But
much
we-
time, what was their sentence?
It ranged from 15 years to 20 years for all 5.
15 years to 20 years each.
Yes, sir. Well, each person was sentenced with a concurrent, so they were charged with 3 things: burglary in the first degree, armed robbery, and possession of a weapon during a violent crime. The burglary first degree was 20 years for one individual, and the armed robbery 20, and 5 for the weapon. And that process matched each person down the line.
How old were they?
They ranged in ages from 23 was the oldest person. The youngest one was about a month from turning 17,
What year was that?
2011.
I place the blame for
Are
my
they
actions
still in
on my
prison?
shoulders.
Yes, sir. The first one will be released next year.
I never imagined standing
All right.
here and
Thank
being
you.
in this circumstance.
Your Honor, next
I
we
have
have
a
Laura.
profound and deep disappointment in myself.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
It is a very difficult,
My name is Laura Blue.
constant feeling that I will carry
from-
with me for the rest of my life.
13 years,
Today, I'm grateful
being
for
in
the
the
ability to thank the
Buford area,
Satterfields and the Pinckneys.
a citizen of Beaufort, South Carolina. I've known
Expressing their
Corey as
forgiveness
being
to
my
me.
landlord.
when I was sentenced in federal court, and for letting me know that they're praying for me.
It's just
It means
so
the
much
world to me.
I could say about this man.
It is helping me through
I
a
have
very
2
difficult
children.
time.
We were homeless, living in a hotel.
Although I've already made these remarks in federal court, I want this court to know my regrets, my failings, and my heart. And I don't think I can say how sorry I am too much
It was
to
during
any of
Christmas
these
time.
people. So I'll say these words again.
We
to
were
the Satterfield
transitioning
family.
from the hotel to
Your mother was
the
a very
residence
good
in
woman.
which he was allowing me to rent.
In the aftermath of losing her so tragically,
And
suddenly, you deserved a lawyer
when I went into the home,
that had only your best interest at heart. You deserve someone to be honest with you. You deserve someone who talked
he
with you.
immediately
You deserve someone who dealt
shared with
you
me that I
fairly.
didn't have to do the first month rent.
And you deserve someone
and
who would not betray
Make
your
sure I get
trust.
my kids some
I did
toys
not
for
do those
Christmas.
things. I failed you.
My son was 7, my daughter was
To
9.
Michelle Pinckney, I
We've
not
been in a
only
home
betrayed you as a client,
13 years.
I betrayed
My
you as a
son
friend.
graduated from Beaufort High
You suffered
School.
a tremendous loss
He's now
that
in the
no parent
United
should
States
ever endure.
Navy. I have a
You were-
22-year-old
you and your
daughter.
entire family
She's
were good to me.
currently the business manager at St. Helena in Port Royal.
I have no
I have a
words
4-year-old grandchild
for how
that
empty I
actually
feel
came
when
into
I
the
think of
home
how
while
you
we were
must feel
there.
about me. You
I would
deserve
say from
much
landlord to
better.
family, that's how we look
I
at
failed you
him.
and I failed your family.
Both of my children
To
looks
both
at
the
him very
Satterfields and
highly
the
as an
Pinckneys,
uncle.
For these failures,
He's
I
very
am immensely
respected by
sorry.
both of them.
I know that an apology
In spite
is
of what's
inadequate,
going on,
but please
we
know
talked.
that I am
I've
genuinely
relocated to
incredibly sorry
Missouri,
for my treatment
so
of
I
you.
flew in to speak on who he is to us as a
Next, I want to
family.
apologize to my former colleagues in the
My
South
daughter
Carolina
spoke
Bar,
at the
South Carolina Supreme Court,
Federal,
the Office of Disciplinary Counsel.
and I will say this,
My
Judge,
actions have cast a negative perception on
during
the
this
legal
time, while I was in
profession. I
Missouri,
understand that the public's confidence
Corey
in
and
our
I
judicial system
text,
has
talk,
eroded as a result of this case. I am
try to
deeply
encourage him,
sorry that my
plenty nights
actions have
through
negatively impacted
texting
the
and
profession
sending
that I
scriptures
love
to let him know
and people that I care
that in
deeply
the
for.
Bible, God forgive us of all our sins.
I have permanently resigned from the South Carolina
He asked
Bar
me
because I no
when I came
longer
down and
deserve the
visit my
privilege
family here,
of practicing
if it was
upon you.
possible to just come by his home, he needed to share something with me.
I want to apologize to
In
my
spite of the
former law
media,
partners and
in
staff.
spite of people
My
around me,
actions have caused a
he called
tremendous
me,
amount of
him and his
stress,
wife, went to
burden,
the
and
home,
heartache on each
he
one of you.
talked with me, he
Truly
shared
sorry for the
things.
pain I've
He didn't go
caused.
in depth or anything. He just let me know. He did something,
Members of the
he
Beaufort
just couldn't get
community
over the hump of understanding
have let
that it
down.
has to be, it has to go, he has
I
to
love
forgive
Beaufort.
himself.
I've always considered myself lucky to
I will
live
tell you
amongst
today,
this
Judge,
community.
on behalf of my
I'm
family,
extremely grateful for those who
we
stood up for
truly,
me
truly,
and offered
by no
kind
means,
words.
look at
that were
him
very
more
much
than
needed.
just my landlord. Again, he's my family. I rest assured his family has supported me tremendously. They didn't ask me to come, they didn't beg me to, I asked them, can I please come?
My children,
Can I please, every day, what can we do? Because again, like I say, this
I will
man
spend
took
the
my
rest of
family
life
in,
regretting the shame,
put a roof over my head with 2 children.
turmoil that
And
I've
he made sure
inflicted on
not
our
one
family.
day, if I was late, he overcharged me. Not one day he made eviction notice or anything. And
Each of you
I've
have
been
been
late
a
many of
tremendous
times.
source of support
Yet he
to me
let us
during
stay in the
past 2
home.
years,
He was ready
I
to
don't feel
renovate
that I
the home
deserve it.
right before my son was graduating.
but I promise
And I was working for Department of Social
Promise you
Service
that I
inside
will
Child
strive
Protective
every
Service as an
day
investigator.
to earn
Not
back
making
your
much
respect,
money.
to be worthy
And
of
I
your love.
told him, I said, Mr. Fleming, if we leave, where could we possibly go for the next 3
Thank you for
months
standing
until
by
my
me during
son
this very
graduates?
dark time.
He said, you know what, you guys stay here, and when he graduates, then we'll go ahead and start the renovation of the home. So I just
Your
ask
Honor,
that you just take
I know
into
that I
consideration
deserve
what
to
I
be
said about
punished
this
for my
man.
conduct.
Thank you, Your Honor.
I take full responsibility for my actions. I can assure this court that I will live the rest of my days trying to follow the lessons that I've learned, to remember what is actually important in life, time spent with my family and my friends. To know that doing things for others is how to gain fulfillment out of life. It does not come through material possessions, Your Honor. Other people have spoken to me, my friends in the community, about what I've lost in this ordeal, but I'm looking at all that I've gained. I've had to take a very hard look in the mirror. Many of those people, I didn't like everything that I saw. I can have life change how lucky I am and irreversible consequences. I'm incredibly grateful for my life. Despite knowing this firsthand, I made some terrible decisions and I broke the law for their support and love. Today, I offer this court no excuses. There were times in my life when I took these people for granted. There are no excuses, but I'm looking at life through a new lens. I place the blame for my actions on my shoulders. When I decided to plead guilty, nobody in federal court, I didn't have any assurances of what my sentence would be. I never imagined standing here and being in this circumstance. But I made a conscious decision to have trust in the legal system and deep disappointment, one that I betrayed. I betrayed this system. It is a very difficult, constant feeling that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. I understand how difficult your role in this process is. Today, I'm grateful for the ability to thank Ms. Satterfield and Pinckney's for the opportunity to address your court, for expressing your forgiveness to me when I was sentenced in federal court, and for letting me know that they're praying for me. It means the world
Your
to
Honor, in
me.
conclusion, I just make
It is helping me through a
very, very
difficult
brief
time.
remarks.
Although I've already made these remarks in federal court, I want this court to know my regrets, my failings, and my heart.
As I said, I
don't
know
think
Your
I can
Honor
say how sorry I am too much.
has a very difficult job in
any
this
of these
process, and I have
So I'll
always
say these
observed
words
firsthand the
again.
dignity that you treat
To the
defendants
Satterfield
with.
family.
I would respectfully
Your mother was a very
submit
good
to you,
woman.
Your Honor, that in this
In the
case,
aftermath of
a
losing her so
concurrent
tragically,
46-month sentence
you deserved a
is
lawyer
sufficient punishment
that had only your best
and will
interest
protect the
at heart.
public.
You
It
deserve
will serve
someone
as a
to be honest
deterrent
with you
I believe there's
You
already
deserve
been a
somebody who
significant
taught
deterrent
you.
effect.
You deserve
But I
somebody
think,
who dealt with you fairly,
The sentence is
like
life.
your family.
One of
To
the
both
things
the
the court
Satterfields
always
and the Pinkeys.
considers in these
For
matters
these
is whether or not
failures,
somebody has a
I am
criminal
immensely
history.
sorry.
Mr. Fleming had no
I
criminal
know
history
that an
prior to this
apology is
case.
inadequate.
He has
But
made,
please
I
know
would submit,
that I am genuinely
significant
incredibly sorry
efforts
for my
already
treatment
at
of you.
rehabilitation. And he's going to continue to do that,
Next, I want to
as he,
apologize to my former colleagues in the South. I sing amongst you.
encompass all of the,
I sing amongst you.
encompass all of the conduct, all of the
I wanna
illegal
apologize to my
conduct to
former
which
law
he has,
partners and staff. I know that my actions
acknowledged,
have caused a tremendous amount of stress,
including
burden,
the
and
Pinckney
heartache
case,
on
which
each one
was,
of you.
I discussed, was
Sorry for the
already
pain I've caused.
considered. The Pinckneys were victims in the
I'm sorry
federal
to my
case.
friends
Their
and members
loss
of the
amount
Beaufort community
was calculated, their
that I have
restitution
let
was
down.
ordered, and they were treated under the
I
mandatory
love Beaufort.
Victims
I've
Act.
always considered myself
But a
lucky to live amongst
46-month
this
concurrent
community.
sentence will reflect the seriousness of this
Extremely
offense.
grateful for those who've
It
stood
will
up for
promote
me
respect for the
and
law,
offered kind
and it
words
will provide just
that were
punishment.
very much needed.
And I thank you again, Your Honor, for all of your consideration and for you taking the time to hear us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know this has been a long proceeding, and I'm not going to talk for a long time.
I spent the rest of my life regretting the shame.
Your Honor was asking
Turmoil
one of the
that I've
people that
inflicted
spoke
on our
on behalf
family.
of Mr. Fleming about the terrible crimes that happened to that person and the ages of those
Each
people.
of you have been a
And
tremendous
we don't
source
know
of support to me during the past 2
Now
years.
what
I don't
their
feel that I
lives were
deserve
like,
it.
their backgrounds were like, the opportunities
But
they
I
had, the
promise-
privileges they had.
I promise you that I will strive every day to earn back your respect and be
There was very
worthy of your
significant
love.
accountability for that, for those young men. And rightfully so.
Thank you for standing by me during this very dark time. I love you
But
so
there has to be significant accountability here too.
Your Honor, I know that I deserve to be punished for my conduct. I take full responsibility for my
One thing you didn't hear a
actions.
lot about, Your Honor,
I can assure this court that I will live the
was
rest of my days
the facts of
Trying to
what
follow the
Mr.
lessons
Fleming,
I learned
even to this
to
point,
remember
actually claimed.
what is actually important in life, time spent
What we
with
know
my family and my friends.
is that when he first got called by Lee Cope,
To know that doing things for others
he said,
is how
oh,
to
the
gain
Satterfields,
fulfillment
but he
out
didn't
of life.
disclose any of that.
Spoken to
In
me,
fact, for the longest time,
friends,
he claimed he was a
community
victim.
about what I've lost, looking at all that I've gained.
Called him red-handed.
I've had to
He
take a
didn't
very
change.
hard look in the
He
mirror.
started to say, out of the generosity
everything
of
that
who
I
I
saw.
am, I cut my fee in half.
I have grown from
And
this.
so if I did steal,
spiritually and
they still
emotionally.
were better off than they would have been if I'd taken
I've
my
taken
full
stock in
time.
my life and realized how lucky I am. I'm incredibly grateful for my wife.
Ms. Barbier read from
my
our
family,
memo,
friends,
and she left out
support and love.
one clause
I believe
about
there were
what the
times
state's
in my life
position
when I took these
is.
people for granted.
And that clause is that
But I'm
what
looking
Fleming
at
didn't
life
realize,
from
because
this.
he knew that the scheme as usual
When I
depended on
decided to
some
plead guilty
significant
in
portion of the
federal
funds
court, I didn't
going
have any assurances that
to
what my sentence
the
would be
family so
there
that
or
that
was
sleight of
not.
hand works. They're too
I made a
focused on
conscious
this right
decision
here
to
to
have
know that
trust
this
in
is
the
what
legal
I'm
system. One that
And
I
what
betrayed. I
Mr.
betrayed the
Fleming, when
system,
finally pushed against the
and
wall,
I am perhaps undeserving of
his
that.
final version that went to federal court with,
I understand how
essentially this,
difficult
Your Honor,
your role in this process is.
that every
sincerely thank
single
you
one of those forged
for the
checks
opportunity
that
to
he
address
cut
the
from
court
his
and for
trust
considering
account.
the information presented on my
The
behalf.
$403,000 one, the $2.9 million one, and the $118,000 one.
Your Honor, in
That he
conclusion,
believed
I just like to make a very,
that
very
Alec-
brief remarks. I-
That those boys, that the Satterfield family was gonna get every dime. And the only thing he was willing to concede, once he had finally been pushed against the wall, time after time, and revelation after revelation, was that he had withheld
As I said, I know Your Honor
that $105,000
has a
in
very
fake
difficult job in
prosecution
this
expenses.
process, and I have
for
always observed
And the
firsthand the
interesting thing
dignity that
about
you
that
treat defendants with.
Is that,
I
for you
would
to
I would
accept that to be true,
respectfully
what his version
submit
is
to you,
that
Your
Alec
Honor,
never
that
even came
in
and
this
got that.
case,
Because as we
a
know,
concurrent
there was
46-month
$113,000 still in
sentence
his trust account.
is
when
sufficient
everything came to
punishment
light. So what he
and
is
will
trying to
protect the
admit
public.
is that,
It will
yes, I
serve as a
colluded
deterrent.
with Alex Murdaugh.
I believe there's already been a significant deterrent
But
effect.
I didn't think
But I think,
that he had gotten one
the
thin
sentence here
dime
will
of
serve
that money.
that purpose as well. Mr. Fleming
And
has
when the
accepted
state-
responsibility for his bad decisions and his illegal
She made
conduct.
some discussions
And
about
the
one agency deferring to
process of
another, and she mentioned
calculating
press
his
releases.
federal
and
sentence, there's
of course,
an
as
enhancement
always,
calculated in
when the state grand
to
jury
Mr. Fleming's
first
sentencing
indicted
guidelines,
Mr.
and he was
Murdaugh and
sentenced.
others, that's
So
going
that's
back
what he
in
did.
November of
He abused
2021.
his
Remember the
position
press
of
release, we're
trust
gonna
and
we're gonna
abused his
thank
law
the
license.
supporting agencies, but
And he's
she's
taken
had
full
those
accountability for
transcripts.
that.
She's read the
You have
extensive
heard about his
testimony that
worst
we
days?
presented from the witnesses in the state grand jury
And I
in
hope you
November of
will also
21,
know that those bad
December of 21,
decisions
in January
do
of
not
22,
define his
in
life.
February of 22, in March of 22,
One of the
April
things the
22,
court
and on and
always
on. She's
considers
read
in these
the
matters is
information
whether or
about
not
her
somebody
client
has a
that was
criminal
gathered by
history.
state grand jury
Mr.
subpoenas
Fleming
during
had
that
no
time.
criminal history prior to this case.
And when
He
Mr.
has
Fleming
made,
sat
I
down
would
and told
submit,
that story,
significant
that I
efforts
believe
already at
every
rehabilitation.
dime was going to those
And he's going to
Satterfield
continue to do
family.
that
That-
as he,
When I was at my
serves his
dirtiest, my motives
sentences.
were the most pure.
he has expressed
That because I had cut my
Extreme
fee in
remorse.
half, even if I'd stolen money,
He
they were
only
still
seeks a
gonna be
chance, Your
better
Honor,
off than they would
to
have.
serve his time.
And the state
then
said,
rebuild his
that makes
life.
no sense. And it makes no
And
sense
while
for
he-
all
and
that
to-
I've detailed
to
for
be
you
able
here
to
today.
be
That
released
course
from
of
prison
conduct that
and still have
shows
time to
that he
contribute
knew
to
what was
society.
going on, he was instrumental in it. And
Your
so
Honor,
when he talks
in
about
conclusion,
accepting
I would submit
responsibility,
that
he's
a
not
46-month
accepting true
concurrent sentence
responsibility. And that is why
will
there needs to be accountability in state court.
encompass all of the
That is
conduct,
why
all of the illegal
That
conduct
when
to
the
which he
state said,
has
hold on, Mr. Fleming, that doesn't fit with the
acknowledged,
facts, that doesn't fit with common sense, that
including
doesn't fit with all we
the
know
Pinckney
about how
case,
this
which
went
was-
down.
I discussed was
Mr.
already
Fleming, And we
considered.
said, give us some more information, give us some more
Pinckney's were
time, Mr. Fleming.
victims in the
Instead,
federal case, their
went down the
loss
street
amount was
and made it
calculated, their
to just
restitution was ordered,
bypass
and they were
accountability
treated
in
under
this
the
courtroom,
Mandatory
which this is where the
Victims
affront
Act.
occurred.
But a 46-month concurrent sentence will reflect the seriousness
Ms.
seriousness of this
Barbier went
offense.
in great
It will
detail.
promote
And
respect for the
Mr. Fleming
law,
said it too, about how
and it
he
will
pled
provide
guilty in
just
federal court with
punishment.
no deals.
And I thank you again, Your Honor, for all of your
No deals.
consideration.
And he talks about how the
taking the
opinions
time
were
to hear us
considered
today.
in the pre-sentencing report, which of course the state doesn't have. We don't know what was in that. Thank you, Your Honor. I know this has been a long proceeding, and I'm not gonna talk for a long time. But what he leaves out, when they make this great presentation to you, how they pled with
Use
no
of
deals,
position
and
of
therefore
trust.
that's enough. Just let the feds handle it.
Your Honor was asking one of the
Thumbed our nose at
people
the
that
state,
spoke
thumbed our
on
nose
behalf
at
of
our
Mr. Fleming
obligations in the
about
agreement we
the terrible
signed, and
crimes
went
that
down
happened
the
to
street.
that person.
What he leaves out
The
is
ages of those people.
that he was allowed to
And we
plead
don't know
to a single
what
lesser
their
offense,
lives were like, their
one
background in
charge,
life, the
0 to
opportunities
5
they had,
years.
the privileges they had.
If you had done one charge of what it should have been, that's a 20-year offense. And even Judge Gergel in the plea transcript, on page 75, when they were trying to say, well, there's no deals, we didn't do a substantial or a downward departure, says,
But there has
well,
to be
in some ways, you've already given him a 5K, which is a
significant
downward
accountability
departure motion,
here too.
by allowing him to plead to the less serious offense. One charge for 0 to 5
One thing you didn't hear a
years
lot about
is not enough, Your Honor. It's not enough for the reasons that I expressed to you. It's not enough
The facts of
because
what
of the
Mr.
difference
Fleming
between
even
what
to
was
this
admitted to
point
in federal
actually
court
claimed.
and what we have exposed here today.
What we know
It's not enough
is that when he
because
first
of the
got called
difference
by
that
Lico,
today is where there's the first real
he said,
accountability,
"Oh,
a real
Satterfield,"
conviction
but he
for
didn't
Pamela.
disclose, oh, I was colluding with Alec, oh, I'd stolen checks.
And it's not
oh, I'd been
enough
stealing from Miss Pinckney prior to
because
that. He didn't disclose any of
the
that. In
state
fact, for the
judicial
longest
system
time, he claimed he was a victim.
Needs its say, and then when the
For
state
those
grand
who-
jury called him red-handed, I said before.
He then changed.
A lawyer should not
Started
have
to
to
say,
say,
out
out
of
of
the
the generosity of who I
He
am,
didn't
I
wanna
cut
stop
my fee in
shop.
half. And so if I did
For that
steal,
reason,
they still
we
were
submit
better
there
off. There
should
should
be
be
a
a
lead
lead sentence for the Satterfields and a consecutive lead sentence for the Pinkeys. Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Barbier read from
Thank
our
you.
memo, and she left out one clause.
Well, I guess we've been
about
here
what the state's
listening
position
to
is. And that clause is
argument and
what
presentations
Fleming didn't
concerning
realize,
this.
because he knew that the
goodness,
scheme
about
as
4
usual
hours or
depended
more.
on some significant portion of the funds going
And prior to that time, I
to
was
the family, so that sleight
submitted
of hand works.
voluminous
They're too focused on
materials
this right
to
here,
review.
This is going on behind them.
The one thing that I
What
did not
Mr.
review
Fleming,
is
when finally pushed
Judge
against the wall,
Gergel's
his final
transcript.
version that went to federal court with,
As much as
essentially
I
this, Your Honor.
admire him and
that
his
every single one of those
capabilities
forged checks that he cut
as a
from his,
federal judge and the
trust
great
account.
work that he does.
the 403,000 one, the
I
$2.9
don't
million
defer
one, and the
To
$118,000
the federal
one,
court system
that he believed
in making my
that
decisions.
Alec, that those boys, that the Satterfield family was gonna get
I
every dime.
practiced law for
And the
24
only thing he was
years.
willing to concede, once he had finally been
been
pushed
a
against the
judge
wall,
for
time after time,
23
and revelation
years.
after revelation, was that he had withheld
During my
that
time as a
$105,000
prosecutor, I
in fake
prosecuted
prosecution
police
expenses
chiefs,
for Alec.
probation
And
officers,
the interesting thing about that is
professors,
that for you to accept that to be true, what his version is that Alec never even came and got that.
and as
'Cause
judge,
we
as
know,
a judge,
there was
sentenced church
$113,000 still in his
secretaries,
trust
preachers,
account
professors.
when everything came to light. So what he is trying to admit is, but I didn't think that he had gotten
until I
one thin dime of that money.
Came down to this 14th Circuit in March. I
And
never
when the state,
sentenced a lawyer.
and she made some discussions
Lawyer
about
was
one
sentenced
agency
to
deferring to
consecutive
another, and she mentioned press releases and.
life
Of course,
sentences.
as always, when the
Now
state
I
grand
have a
jury
lawyer,
first
co-defendant,
indicted
colleague
Mr.
of
Murdaugh
his,
and others, that's going back in November of
facing
2021. In the press
195
release, we're gonna
years
thank,
in
we're
prison.
gonna thank supporting agencies, but she's had
In
those
addition to
transcripts. She's read the
dealing
extensive
with the
testimony that we
sentencing all
presented
those
from the
folks,
witnesses in the state grand jury in
I've
November
certainly
of
dealt with
21,
my share
in
of
December of 21, in January of
grand
22,
larceny
in February of
cases,
22, in March of 22, April of 22, and
people
on
who
and on.
might steal an
She's read the
automobile,
information about her client that was gathered by state grand jury
facing
subpoenas
10
during
years
that
in
time.
prison, a
And when
shoplifter
Mr. Fleming
who,
sat down and told that story,
after the
that
third
I
offense,
believe
of facing
that
10 years
every
in
dime was
prison.
going to those Satterfield family.
And I've had my
that
share of sentencing people
When
like
I was at my
the
dirtiest, my motives were the most pure.
the assailants who
That because I had cut my fee in half, even if I'd stolen money, they were
were
still gonna be
convicted
better
of
off
the crimes that
than they would have been.
was
And the
mentioned.
state said, that makes no sense, and it makes no
And
sense
dished
for
out a lot
all
of
that I've
time
detailed for you here today.
many of
That
them.
course of conduct that shows that he knew what was going
So
on,
this
he
is
was
my
instrumental in
second
it.
time
And so when he talks about accepting
in
responsibility,
these
he's not
47
accepting
years
true
having to deal
responsibility.
with
And
an
that
issue
is
of
why
sentencing
there
a
needs to
lawyer.
be accountability in state court. That is why,
I
that when
cannot
the state said,
imagine
hold on, Mr. Fleming, that doesn't fit with the facts, that
more
doesn't fit with common sense, that doesn't fit with all we know about how this went down.
More,
Mr.
anything
Fleming,
more.
And we said, give us some more information, give
precedent.
us some more time.
This is
Mr. Fleming
unprecedented.
instead
This is unimaginable.
went down the street
This is
and made a deal to just
I think
bypass
the
accountability.
greatest
This is
crime-
a real conviction for. And it's not enough because the state
now
judicial
the
system needs its say.
presentations
who-
on behalf of Mr. Fleming were certainly inspiring.
I said before, a lawyer should not have a decade of conduct.
Reminded me of the revival
And
that
get
we had at our
one-stop
church last
shop.
week.
For that reason,
Reminded me of
we submit there should be a lead sentence for the
funeral
Satterfields
services that
and a
I've had to
consecutive lead
attend,
sentence for the Pink.
particularly within the last year.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. And I've heard a lot of testimonies. So I guess we've been here listening to, they can go on and on. Argument, presentations concerning this, so we, goodness, about 4 hours or more. Limit their comments to 2 minutes because everyone has. And prior to that time, so many good things submitted to say. Voluminous materials to review. And most folks reminded me of what, the one thing that I did not review is Judge sort of Gurgle's transcript, dual sovereignty of the state court. As much as I read admire him and his Gurgle's transcript, capabilities in a different as a system, a federal judge, and the great work that he does. I've never deferred to a federal. I don't defer court to the federal court system for as a state in making my decisions. I practiced law for 24 years. Now, for all of the great things judge for 23 years. But Mr. Fleming, during my time as a prosecutor, I made the funeral reference police chiefs as if probation officers, as if he's no longer with us, as professors. We're at a funeral, and that he will not have an opportunity to redeem himself. He will not have an opportunity. Church secretaries, preachers, professors, do good deeds. Law enforcement folks, and someone mentioned that the things that he was able to share his tale. But until with others, well, he'll have an opportunity to this 14th Circuit in his March. I never, in the consequence, sentenced a lawyer with people that he will meet that will be in dire need of his to consecutive counsel and advice. Life sentences. Now I have a lawyer, co-defendant, colleague of his, facing 195 years. Now, since coming here for Murdaugh, in addition to trial in March, dealing with and sentencing all those folks, back here 2 weeks ago, I've certainly dealt with my share of a trial, another trial in larceny cases. People who, mother who had been teacher of the year in the school system, facing 10 years in prison, left her a shoplifter who 13-year defense to handicapped 10 years in prison, child in a car. And I've had my share of sentencing people like the 1 degrees outside, the assailants who left that child in the car until about 5 or 6 convicted of the crimes that, and she was constantly in and around the car with her boyfriend, and dished out a lot of time to many of them. Climatologists testify that the temperature in that car got up to, so this is my second time, 39 degrees. In these 47 years having to deal with an issue of sentence, and the testimonies, presentations over this mother and her mistake, she was on methamphetamine. I cannot imagine boyfriend a more as remorseful. I cannot imagine anyone giving me a presentation of a mother. Precedent loved her child, and unprecedented. Went wayward and more concerned about using drugs and pleasing her boyfriend. I think the greatest crime, her child, for a lawyer, and she got 37 in the history of the state of South Carolina. Murder. That was 2 weeks ago here in the same 14th Circuit. In the number of years being faced and the impact of the crimes and the folks who came to talk on the citizens of the state. I cannot imagine anyone going to a lawyer in South Carolina at this moment in time and having complete trust in what that lawyer abandoned the child says to them. Listening to Mr. Bamberg talk, of course, about part of my years of practice, I've had clients come to me with I'm thinking, that same type of vulnerability. Said that they didn't know how much money they got on their case, that they went to that lawyer's office and had. It was a child that was turned over, and they just was asked to sign the check. So they came to me to find out how much money they got in their case. And so he placed his trust. But this is totally respected member of the bar, a very respected member of this community. I could tell that by this state, all of the folks here, where the amount of thievery exceeded. Sometimes say that there isn't very much between any of us. We all have good and we all have bad, and certainly everyone now here to tell me about all the good in Mr. Fleming, but the presentation we're dealing with the consequences were certainly inspiring. That is as bad as it gets in this case. For reminding me of the revival that we had at our church last week. Who has a prior record? Reminding me of he has no prior funeral services that conviction attend. But when you carry on a scheme within the last year, over a decade, that's a record. And I've heard a lot of testimonies that. So much so that did not result in charges and go on and on. The churches, of his life, funeral, and so we asked people to limit their comments to 2 minutes. And as bad as it was with so many good things, then we moved to the Satterfields again. And vulnerable most people. Folks reminded me of what So was said in federal court. I know that many of the friends, sort of a disregard to the dual sovereignty of the state court. Not at what I didn't read Judge Corey Fleming Gergel's transcript. He's in a different time system, a different sovereignty. This Corey Fleming in these cases referred to a federal court. Quite frankly, guide my sentence. People come to me and as a state court judge, lay the burden on me. Said, Judge, please be lenient. That's not my responsibility. You know, I believe in justice and mercy. Now, for all of the great things leniency is not said, part of Micah, but Mr. Fleming, the scripture, and I made the funeral reference because it's as if as if he's no longer with us, as if, you know, we're at a funeral. 195 years. And that he will not have an opportunity to redeem himself. He will not have an opportunity to do good deeds. And someone mentioned that the things that he was able to share his tale with others. Well, he'll have an opportunity to share his tale and his story. Mr. Fleming, if you'll come around for the consequences of his choices with people that he will meet that will be in dire need of his counsel and advice. My heart bleeds for you because I have no doubt, since coming here from Murdaugh, that you are during that trial as in March, reflected by all of the, and I was positive another trial in College consequences of a mother who had been teacher of the year standing before in the school system there, and left her tempering justice with mercy. 13-year-old, totally handicapped and disabled child in a car beginning at 11 a.m. when it was 91 degrees outside. And there are so many in the car. If I were to spend time here now, p.m. And she's constantly in and around the car with her boyfriend. We'd be here for a few hours probably. And a climatologist testified that the temperature in that car got up to say with regard to the 39 degrees. Satterfield, and you're talking about remorse. My clerk here, and the testimonies, take notes, presentations over this mother and her mistake. She was on 10 methamphetamine with her boyfriend. As remorseful, I cannot imagine anyone giving me a presentation of 0 to 5. The sentence is 5 years. Who loved her child and who went wayward. I wrote insurance. Is that insurance fraud? Concerned about using drugs and pleasing her boyfriend and count number, her child indictment number, and she got 37 years in prison, convicted of murder. Count 11, Your Honor. Count 11. 2 weeks ago, here in the same. Exposure is 0 to 10. The sentence is 10 years. On the breach of trust with the 10-year possibility came to talk with him. Her exposure sentence is 10 years. Nothing she wouldn't do for her child. On the money laundering, where the exposure is 0 to 20 years, the sentence is 10 years. Listening to Mr. Bamberg. On the 5-year breach of trust, the sentence is 5 years. Money laundering, that same type of vulnerability, 5 years. And on the computer, that child sentence had. He was a child at the time, wasn't he? And each of those will run concurrent with each other. And so he placed his trust. And respected member of the bar, a very respected member of this community. And I can tell that by the 5 and folks here. Counts 5 and 9, is it?
Yes, sir.
Where the exposure is 5 years, the sentence is 5 years. Sometimes say that there isn't 30 very much between count 6. Any of us, we all have good and we all have bad, and certainly everyone was here to tell me about all the good in Mr. Fleming, but charge sentences. We're dealing with the consequences of the bad, and that is as bad as it gets in this case. The exposure is 10 years. Lawyer. The sentence is 10 years. Who has a prior record? that sentence will run consecutive. He has no prior to the sentence that you're currently serving. But when you carry on a scheme of over a decade, that's a record. All the sentences otherwise will run concurrent with each other. That did not result in charges or defer any record of his life. Restitution hearings, I believe it's just too convoluted for me to get a true handle on what the state is seeking and what should be ordered. And then we move to tend to think that it's, again, vulnerable people. Well, I don't want to prejudge whether it's necessary or not. I know that many of the friends and family, any ruling regarding any restitution. Totally shocked. I'm not sure whether the state is actually seeking it. Good Corey Fleming. Actual loss. If there is, done over whether the parties can agree. But we can have a separate hearing solely dealing with restitution and, if necessary. Sentence of the court, and the people come to me and Fleming wanted to lay the burden on me, so Judge, please be lenient. That's not my responsibility. I believe in justice and mercy. But leniency is not part of Micah. The scripture. So I need to take time to work with all this. Were you following everything? You want to put the years on 195 years. Anything further here today, Mr. Waters?
No, sir. That would conclude the state grand jury matters for today, Your Honor.
All right, court will be adjourned. Anything else before I impose my sentence? Mr. Fleming, if you'd come around for sentencing. My heart bleeds for you because I have no doubt of the quality comments. That you must suffer the consequences of your actions in these cases that you're standing before me for. And tempering justice with mercy. It's my responsibility to impose a sentence. And there are so many. If I were to spend time here now imposing a sentence on each of these indictments individually, it would be here for a few hours probably. So suffice it to say with regard to the Satterfields, and I need my clerk here to take notes for me. On count 10, where the exposure is 0 to 5, the sentence is 5 years. I wrote insurance. Is that insurance fraud? That is count number or indictment number. Count 11, and the exposure is 0 to 10, the sentence is 10 years. On the breach of trust with the 10-year possibility or exposure, the sentence is 10 years. On the money laundering, where the exposure is 0 to 20 years, the sentence is 10 years. On the 5-year breach of trust, the sentence is 5 years. On the 5-year money laundering, I believe it is, it's 5 years. And on the computer crime, the sentence is 5 years. And each of those will run concurrent with each other. As to the breach of trust involving Pinckney's counts 5 and 9, is it? Where the exposure is 5 years, the sentence is 5 years. The 30-day breach of trust, count 6, the sentence is time served. On the conspiracy charge, sentence is 5 years. On the breach of trust, where the exposure is 10 years, the sentence is 10 years. And that sentence will run consecutive to the sentence that you're currently serving. All the sentences otherwise will run concurrent with each other. I'm going to defer any restitution hearings. I believe it's just too convoluted for me to get a true handle on what the state is seeking and what should be ordered, and I tend to think that it's, well, I don't want to prejudge whether it's necessary or not, but I'm going to defer any ruling regarding any restitution. I'm not sure whether the state is actually seeking it, whether there's an actual loss, if there is, whether the parties can agree. We can have a separate hearing solely dealing with restitution if necessary. As sentence of the court, I give you best wishes, Mr. Fleming.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So I need to take time to work with all this. Were you following everything? You want to put the years on them? Yeah. Anything further here today, Mr. Waters?
No, sir, that would conclude the state grand jury matters for today, Your
All
Honor.
right, court will be adjourned.
also privileged to call myself a trial. I've known Corey Fleming since he first started practicing law. However, I've known his family literally since the first day I moved to Beaufort, and that was March the 3rd of 1967. I was at the hearing when Judge Gergel sentenced Corey Fleming. It was a remarkable proceeding. And the thing that she still loved him and that she forgave him. And I never will forget his response. I don't know how many criminals, and I understand you have a transcript of that proceeding, and I invite you to see if I'm correct in my recitation. A little over a month, no, a little less than a month ago. That proceeding was on the 15th of last month. A little less than last month. Well, why would that be important? I've heard a lot of negative stuff about Corey Fleming, and there's no one here, his family supports his conduct that brought him in front of you today. They didn't support it in front of Judge Gergel on the 15th of August. However, they realize that there is great wisdom in a little piece of scripture found in the 51st Psalm, which is David's great lament after Nathan brought a broken and contrite heart, O Lord, you will not embrace. We embrace Corey in his broken and contrite state. And to what purpose would we do that? Why would we do something like that? Because we see a goodness in Corey that has been covered up. There's been a lot of discussion about sentencing and the bad acts, rightly so, that Corey has committed. But I'm reminded that human nature and human behavior can change. Well, what is the most powerful vehicle to change human behavior and nature? It's adversity, it's struggle. We don't have our kids grow up healthy by giving them cream and ice cream all the time, cake and ice cream all the time. We subject them to adversity. Now, this adversity is brought on by Corey himself. I wonder how many of us can claim that our conduct has been so pure, so innocent, that we haven't had the chance to grow up through adversity. No, we can't excuse, justify, or defend the events that brings Corey in front of you today. But we're not going to leave him. We're going to actively participate in his restoration in this community, his recovery, his healing. And through that, I hope that the court will find some assurance that through this period of adversity in Corey's life, he will grow, change forever for the better. I thank you for the opportunity of appearing before you in behalf of my friend, Corey Fleming.
Your Honor, next, Shannon Wilkes would like to address the court.
Good afternoon, Judge. I met Corey and Eve in 1998 when I moved to Beaufort. I needed a job, and I was a young paralegal at the time, and I began to work for Corey as his paralegal, and I did so for 2.5 years. Corey was a relatively new attorney, and like I said, I was a new paralegal, but through working together, and Corey still reminds me of this today, we learned a lot from each other. We had a positive and open working relationship where he treated me like a colleague and not just his paralegal or someone who worked for him. I worked with him. Corey always treated me and his clients with respect, compassion, and kindness. I have witnessed many times firsthand the love and devotion that Corey has for his wife, Eve, his children, his parents, his extended family, and his friends. One evening during a dark and desperate time in my life, and Corey probably doesn't even remember that he did this for me, I knocked on the front door of Corey and Eve's home. When Corey opened that door, he saw me not just as his paralegal, but a friend in need.
I'm also privileged to.
Neither one
call myself a
hesitated
trial
to let me in that door
lawyer.
and give me a
I've
shoulder
known
to cry
Corey
on.
Fleming since he first started practicing law. However, I've
I'm
known
here
his
today as a
family
supporter of Corey.
literally since the first day I moved. to
Being a
Beaufort,
supporter of Corey
and
does
that
not
was March
mean
the
that I
3rd,
don't understand
1967.
that he made bad choices, because I do
I was
understand.
At
And
the
being a
hearing
supporter of Corey does
when
not
Judge
make
Murdaugh
me a victim
sentenced
of anything.
Corey Fleming.
I am proud to stand here today,
It was a remarkable.
and I'm proud to see that Corey has
proceeding.
taken responsibility
and the
of his bad
that
choices.
she still loved him, and that she forgave him.
And these are choices that he cannot change.
And I never will forget
But he
his
can
response.
choose how
I
to
can't-
face the
I don't know how
effects
many
of the
criminal
choices
cases
he's
I've
made
handled.
now and in the
I don't know how
future.
many times I've
And I
stood
believe
up
Corey is
there
already doing that
and
by
represented
taking
people who had
responsibility
either gone to trial and who were
and
waiting
truly
sentence.
being
I just don't know.
remorseful, because he
But
is
I've
remorseful.
never heard anyone
He and I have talked on
after
numerous
being
occasions
forgiven,
and have discussed our mutual
respond
Christian
by
faith.
thanking
We've shared scripture, we've shared
and then
prayer,
following closely thereafter.
and lessons learned from this
And
scripture.
I understand you have a
And
transcript
I know
of that
through this
proceeding, and I
faith,
invite you to see if I'm
Corey will
correct
live
in
a
my
full
recitation.
life, a life full
A
of
little
purpose.
over a month, no, a little less than a
And
month
he
ago.
has a
That proceeding
willingness
was
to
on the
help
15th of
others
last month.
find their own purpose.
A little less than last month. Well, why would that be important?
Thank you, Judge, for letting me speak.
I've heard a lot of
And I
negative
ask that you
stuff
take the
about
words that
Corey
I've said
Fleming.
into consideration in Corey's
And
sentencing
there's no one
today.
here, his family, his friends, anybody
Your Honor,
that's
next we
here
have, Rich
to support
Giavello.
Corey, that supports his conduct that brought him in front of you today.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
They didn't support it in front of Judge
My name is
Murdaugh
Richard Chiavello.
on the 15th of August.
Thank you for the opportunity to give me
However,
this chance to speak
they
on behalf of my friend Corey
realize that
Fleming.
there is great wisdom
I
in a
met
little
Corey
piece of
22 years
scripture
ago when we both
found
became
in
new
51st
parents.
Psalm, which is David's
many,
great lament after Nathan brought
holidays,
to his attention
birthdays,
his great sin.
And weekends
A broken
together.
and contrite
He-
heart, O Lord, you will not
He's the last person
despise.
that I ever thought I'd be standing here talking
We
to you about
cannot
today.
embrace Corey's conduct.
I've only known
But I'll
Corey
tell you
to be a
what all
loving
of us do
son,
embrace.
husband,
We
father, and
embrace
friend.
Corey in his broken and contrite state. And to
I
what
believe
purpose
Corey
would
to
we
be
do that?
a good man who made
Why
a
would
bad
we
choice.
do something like that?
I also
Because we
believe
see a
that
goodness
when he
in
returns
Corey
to his family and friends,
that has been
he'll
covered up,
dedicate his life
but is
to earn
coming
the
to
respect,
fruition now.
trust, and admiration of all who come
There's
to know him.
been a lot of discussion about sentencing.
Your
and
Honor, I ask that you
the
show
bad
Corey
acts,
as much
rightly
leniency
so,
and mercy as the court will
that
allow.
Corey is committed.
Thank you.
But I'm reminded
There are
that
several people that
human
were
nature and
here
human
earlier,
behavior
who
can
had to go.
change.
They didn't know it was gonna last this long and had to
Well, what is the most powerful vehicle to change human
They've
behavior
left
and
me their
nature?
statements, and I'd like
It's
to read them if I
adversity.
can.
It's struggle. We don't
Mailed to me or
have
had
our
me to read
kids
before.
grow up
There are,
healthy
Your Honor, there's one statement from.
by giving them cream and ice cream all the time, cake and ice cream all the time.
Much of the same thing.
We subject them to adversity. Now, this adversity is brought on by Corey himself.
You submitted them all
wonder how
to me
many
to read,
of
and
us
I've
can
read
claim
them, and so I don't
That our
need you
conduct has been so
to
pure,
read them again if you've
so
already
innocent,
read
that we haven't had
Another
the
from the
chance
same
to
person?
grow up through adversity.
And,
No,
but I just wanted the court to know that
we can't excuse,
I've had the privilege of
justify, or
knowing
defend
Corey since
the events
2009, and
that
I'm
brings
eager
Corey
to
in
share
front of you today.
my insights about
But
his
we're not gonna
character
leave
and the
you.
positive impact he has
We're
had
gonna
with my
actively
family
participate
and our
in
community.
his restoration
I first
in this
met Corey
community,
at the
his
YMCA.
recovery, his healing.
Where our shared
And through
passion
that,
for
I hope
competitive
that
running
the
and
court
physical
will find
fitness
some
brought us together.
assurance
Over
that
the
through
years,
this
we've
period of
participated
adversity
in numerous
in
local running
Corey's
events,
life, he will grow,
forging a strong bond
change
based on our shared
forever
interests and values.
for the better.
I've had the
I thank you for the
opportunity to
opportunity.
see the YMCA's River Swim, a signature fundraiser for our Learn to Swim program. Corey, alongside his daughter, participated
afternoon,
in a
Judge.
challenging 3.2-mile swim. And when I approached
I met
him
Corey
for
and Eve
sponsorship
in 1998
support
when I moved to
of
Beaufort.
the WISE
I needed a job,
worthy cause,
and I was
he
a
didn't
young
hesitate.
paralegal at the time,
In addition
and I began
to
to
our
work for Corey
YMCA
as a
swim,
paralegal. And
I could
did
always
so
count
for
on
2.5
Corey to
years.
sponsor and actively participate
Corey was a
in a
relatively
running
new
event I chaired
attorney,
for
and like I
the
said, I
Parents
was a new
Association
paralegal.
of my son's
But through
school.
working together,
He generously
and Corey
extended
still
beyond
reminds
financial
me of this
contributions.
today,
He consistently went
we
out of
learned
his
a
way
lot
to
from
help
each
others.
other.
I can personally attest
we
to
had a
this.
positive and open working relationship where he treated me like a colleague
I'm a single
and not
mother,
just his
3 sons.
paralegal or someone who worked for him. I worked with him.
There have been times
Corey always treated me and his clients with respect, compassion,
when I relied on
and
Corey's
kindness.
expertise to fix various household
I
issues.
have witnessed many
He
times
never hesitated to lend a
firsthand
hand.
the love and
One
devotion
vivid
that Corey
example
has for
is
his
when
wife,
my outdoor
Eve,
shower pipe froze
his children,
and started spraying water
his
everywhere
parents,
on Christmas morning.
his extended family, and his friends.
Despite
One
the holiday
evening during a
festivities,
dark
Corey
and
was there to
desperate
help
time,
at a moment's notice.
on the
Truly
front door of
commendable.
Corey and Eve's
I've had the
home.
privilege of not only being friends with Corey, but also developing
When
a close
Corey
bond
opened
with
that
his
door,
family.
He saw me, not just as his
During my own
paralegal,
challenging
but a
times,
friend
Corey
in
and his
need.
family extended their kindness to
Neither
me
one
without
hesitated
hesitation.
to let me
Their
in that
support
door
and
and
empathy
give me a
served as a
shoulder to
beacon of
cry
light
on.
through my moments of difficulty. Corey has been a
I'm
guiding
here today
figure
as a
in the lives
supporter
of my
of Corey.
sons. He's been a mentor, providing them
Being
with
a
support,
supporter of
advice,
Corey does not
and
mean that I don't
empathetic ear when they
understand
needed someone to
that he
confide
made
in.
bad choices. Because
His
I do
genuine care and
understand.
interest in their well-being
And
have
being a
made him a beloved
supporter of
figure in our
Corey
home,
does not
and we
make me a
often
victim
refer to
of
him as
anything.
Uncle Corey, despite not
I am
being
proud
related
to
by
stand
blood.
here today, and I'm
Corey's
proud
character
to see that Corey has taken
He's
responsibility
one of generosity, acts
of
of
his bad
kindness, and a strong
choices.
sense of responsibility towards his family, friends, and community.
And these are
He
choices
has
that he
consistently
cannot change.
demonstrated his commitment to making
he
a
can
positive
choose
impact, and his
How to
contributions
face
have
the
left a
effects
lasting
of the
mark on
choices
the lives
he's
of
made
many,
now and in the
especially
future.
my family.
And I believe Corey
I
is already doing that
respectfully request
by taking
that you consider my
responsibility
testimony when determining Corey's sentence.
and truly
I
being
firmly believe that
remorseful.
his actions and
because
genuine
he is
goodwill
remorseful.
he has shown throughout the years are a testament
He and I have talked
to
on
his
numerous
character.
occasions
I kindly ask you for your leniency
and have discussed
mercy,
our
and
mutual
grace
appreciation
during the sentencing process.
and lessons learned from
Thank
this
you, Judge
scripture.
Newman, for allowing me to speak.
And I know
on behalf
through
of my
this
friends.
faith, Corey will live a full life, a life full of purpose. And he has a willingness to help others find their own
Good
purpose.
afternoon, Judge. I am Lisa O'Brien, and I'm a Beaufort resident, born and raised
Thank
here.
you, Judge, for letting me speak.
I met Corey and
And I ask
his
that you take
wife
the
and
words that
children
I've
at the
said into
Y.
consideration in Corey's sentencing
I
today.
taught spin there for about 16 years, and he and his family
next we have,
actively
Rich
participated
Chiavella.
in my classes. In 2011, our
Good afternoon, Your
oldest son was brutally attacked
name is Rich
and
Chiavella.
beaten and robbed in his home
Thank you
in
for
the middle of the
opportunity
night
to be-
here in Port
this chance
Royal.
to speak on behalf of my friend Corey Fleming.
I
I
didn't
met Corey 22 years
ask for
ago,
help,
when we both became new
but Corey
parents.
knew my anguish. He saw it on my
many,
face, and he approached me
holidays,
outside
birthdays,
after class and
and
told me that
weekends together.
he and his wife
He-
would do anything to help us through this
He's
process.
the last person that I ever thought I'd
Even though the
stand here
prosecutor would take
talking to you about
control,
today.
he would be there for us.
I've only known Corey to be a loving
He spent
son,
countless hours
husband,
talking
father, and
to
friend.
us over the phone and in person and just helping us to understand what we
I
were
believe
going
Corey
to
to be
face.
a good man who
I've
made
stood in
a
one of
bad
these
choice.
courtrooms at least 5 times
I also believe
as the
that when he
mother of a
returns to his
victim.
family and friends, he will dedicate
Each
his
time
life
Corey
to
has
earn the respect,
put
trust,
himself
and admiration
out
of all who come
to
know
be
him.
there for our family without
Your Honor, I
any
ask that you show Corey as much leniency
anything
and mercy as
asked
the court will allow.
or without any
Thank you.
bragging or patting himself on the back for being a good person.
Several people that
In one of my conversations with Corey at the Y, he told me that one of the hardest things he had to do was to stand in the courtroom while people that didn't have an attorney didn't know what to say, when he could easily go up there and help them. And every day it was hard for him. And there's one more thing I want to mention. When all of this happened, we moved upstate a couple of years ago. And when all of this happened, I came down and I wanted to go into one of the classes and see my old friends.
Read them again.
And
if you've already done that.
I asked Corey if he
Another from the
was
same
going to be
person?
there, and he showed up. And I told him, I said, you know,
I've
I'm
had
not
the
going to
privilege
ask you
of
anything
knowing
about
Corey
these
since
things. I don't
2009,
want you to feel
and I'm
pressured
eager to
to
share
ever be around
my
us.
insights about his character
And
and,
he
the
stopped
positive
me
impact he has had with
in my
family
tracks, and he said,
and our
no,
community.
I have
first met
learned
Corey
from
at the
this
YMCA.
already things about myself. I
Where our
didn't
shared
even
passion
realize I
for
needed to
competitive
know.
running and physical fitness
The
brought us
remorse was
together.
clear,
Over the years,
and
we participated
his actions
in
to
numerous local
stop
running
me
events,
and tell me
forging a
that
strong
he
bond based
had
on our
guilt
shared interests and values.
are
I've had the opportunity
something I
to
can't even
witness firsthand
explain.
Corey's
I didn't
dedication
ask
to the
him,
YMCA.
and he just told me.
For the past 8 years, I have
I
overseen
think
the
what
YMCA's
I
River
want to say
Swim,
most is
a signature
I'm here on my
fundraiser
own
for our
accord.
Learn to Swim program.
I drove 3.5
Corey,
hours to come.
alongside his daughter,
I don't
participated
feel
in the
obligated.
challenging 3.2-mile
I don't feel
swim.
like I have to be.
And when I approached him for sponsorship and support,
There were 5
the
assailants,
Y
and they were apprehended the night
worthy
of the
cause,
crime.
he
They
didn't
were
hesitate.
caught by
In
Detective
addition
Rue.
to our YMCA swim,
And
I could always count on
it
Corey
took
to
about 2
sponsor
years to
and actively
prosecute.
participate
They did all plead
in a running
guilty.
event I chaired
How
first.
much
But
time?
Wheaton was sentenced
I'm a
with
single mother to 3 sons.
concurrent. So they were charged with 3 things: burglary in the first degree,
There have been
armed robbery,
times
and possession of a weapon during a violent
Excuse me.
crime.
when I
The burglary
relied on
first
Corey's
degree,
expertise to fix various
was
household
20
issues.
years for one
He
individual,
never
and
hesitated
the
to
armed
lend a
robbery
hand.
20, and 5 for
One
the weapon.
vivid example
And that
is when
process
my outdoor
matched
shower pipe
each
froze
person
and
down
started
the line.
spraying
How
water
old were they?
everywhere on
They
Christmas
ranged in
morning.
ages from 23 was the oldest person. The youngest one was
Despite
about
the
a month
holiday
from turning
festivities,
17.
Corey was there to help
And
at
what
a
year was
moment's
that?
notice and without
2011.
hesitation.
Are they still
Moreover,
in
Corey's
prison?
unwavering
Yes, sir. The
commitment to
first
his
one will
family
be
is
released
truly
next year.
commendable. I've had the privilege of not only being friends with Corey,
you.
but also developing a close bond with his family. During my own challenging times, Corey and his family
afternoon,
extended
Anna.
their kindness to me
My name is
without
Laura
hesitation.
Blue.
Their support
from
and empathy served as a beacon of light
13
through my
years,
moments of difficulty.
being in the
Corey
Beaufort
has been a
area,
guiding figure in the
a
lives of my
citizen
sons.
of Beaufort, South
He's been a
Carolina.
mentor, providing them with support, advice,
We were
and
homeless, living in a
empathetic ear
hotel.
when they needed someone to confide in. His genuine care and interest in their well-being have made him a beloved figure in our home, and we often refer to him as Uncle Corey, despite not being related by blood.
It was during Christmas time.
Corey's character is one of generosity,
We were
acts of
transitioning
kindness, and a strong sense of
from the hotel
responsibility
to
towards his family,
The
friends,
residence in
and
which he was
community.
allowing me to rent.
He has consistently demonstrated his commitment to
And
making a positive impact, and his
when I went
contributions
into
have
the
left a
home,
lasting mark on the lives of many, especially my family.
Waited from Beaufort High
rec-
School.
Respectfully
He's now in the United
request
States
that you
Navy.
consider my testimony
I have a
when determining
22-year-old
Corey's
daughter.
sentence.
She's
I firmly
currently
believe that his
the business
actions and
manager
genuine goodwill
at
he
St.
has shown
Helena in
throughout the
Port
years
Royal.
are a testament to
I
his
have a
character.
4-year-old
I
grandchild
kindly ask you
that
for your
actually came
leniency,
into the
mercy,
home while we
and
were
grace
there.
in this matter.
I would
I
say
believe
from
Corey's
landlord to
positive
family,
qualities should
that's
be
how we
weighed
look at
during
him.
the sentencing process.
Both of my children
Thank you, Judge Newman,
looks
for
at
allowing
him
me to
very
speak
highly as an
on behalf of my
uncle.
friends.
He's very respected by both of them. In spite of what's going on, try to encourage him.
Good afternoon, Judge.
Plenty nights through
I am Lisa
texting
O'Brien,
and sending
and,
scriptures to let him
I'm a
know
Beaufort
that in the Bible, God
resident,
forgive us
born
of
and
all our
raised here.
sins.
I met Corey and
He asked
his
me
wife and children
When I
at the
came down
Y.
and visit my family here,
I taught spin
If it
there
was
for about 16
he
years.
was very sorry about
and
it.
he and his
He just couldn't
family
get over the hump of
actively
understanding
participated
that it has to be,
in my classes.
has to go, he has to forgive
In
himself.
2011, our
I will tell you
oldest
today,
son
Judge,
was Lanite
truly,
here in Port
by
Royal.
no means, here, and
Bragging
when he
or
graduates,
patting himself
then we'll
on the
go ahead
back
and
for
start
being
the
a good
renovation of the
person.
home.
In
So
one
I
of my
just ask that you
conversations
just
with
take
Corey at the
consideration what I
Y,
said about-
Corey at the
consideration what I
Y,
said about this man.
he told
Thank
me
you,
that
Your
one
Honor.
of the hardest things he had to do was to stand in the courtroom while people that didn't have an attorney didn't know what to say, when he could easily go up there and help them. And every day it was hard for him. And there's one more thing I want to mention. When all of this happened, we moved up, and when all of this happened, I came down and I wanted to go into one of the classes and see my old friends. And he showed up,
For many years, I stood in.
and I told him, I said, you know, I'm not going to ask you anything about these things. I don't want you to feel pressured to ever be around
I was
us.
very aware that one bad
And
decision
he stopped
or a
me
series
in my
of
tracks,
bad
and he said,
decisions can
no.
have life-changing.
I have learned from this already things about
Despite knowing
myself
this
I
firsthand,
didn't even
made some
realize I
terrible
needed to know.
decisions and I broke the law.
The remorse was clear,
Today, all of
and
this court knows
his
is
actions to stop me
There
and tell me that he had guilt are something I can't even explain. I didn't ask him, and he just told me. I think what I want to say most is I'm here on my own accord. I drove 3.5 hours to come. I don't feel obligated. I don't feel like I have to be.
Was the assailant apprehended who?
There were
Case.
5 assailants,
A concurrent
and they were apprehended the
46
night
month
of the
sentence.
crime. Detective Rue.
And will protect the public.
And it took about 2 years to prosecute. They did all plead guilty.
How
but
much
we-
time, what was their sentence?
It ranged from 15 years to 20 years for all 5.
I think
15 years,
The sentence
20
here will
years
serve
each?
that
Yes,
purpose as
sir.
well.
So they were charged
And
with
this
3
was
things: burglary in the
calculated
first
in
degree, armed
to Mr.
robbery,
Fleming's
and possession of
sentencing
a weapon
guidelines,
during a
and he was
violent
sentenced.
crime.
He was held
The
accountable
burglary
for the
first
abuse of
degree,
position of trust. So that's what he did. He
was
abused
20
his
years for
position
one
of trust
individual, and the armed
and abused
robbery
his law
20,
license.
and 5
And
for
he's
the
taken
weapon.
full accountability
And
for
that
But what he leaves out, when they make this great presentation to you, how they pled with no
was
deals,
during
and therefore,
Christmas
that's
time.
enough. Just let the feds handle it. We just,
We were transitioning
thunder knows at the state,
from the
thunder
hotel
knows
to
that our obligations in
the
the agreement we
residence
signed
in which
and
he was
what
allowing me to rent.
What he leaves out is that he
And
was allowed to plead.
when I went into the home, waited from Buford High School. He's now in
I
the
don't
United
know.
States Navy. I have a 22-year-old daughter. She's currently
Sentenced
the
to
business manager at St. Helena in Port
Life
Royal.
sentences.
I have a 4-year-old
Now I
grandchild
have a lawyer,
that actually came
co-defendant,
into the home
colleague
while we
of
were
his,
there.
facing 195
I would say from landlord to
years
family,
in
that's how
prison.
we look at him. Both of my
In
children,
addition to
looks at him
dealing
very
with and
highly as an
sentencing all
uncle.
those folks,
he's very
I've certainly
respected
dealt
by
with my
both of
share
them. In spite of what's
grand
going
larceny
on,
cases. People who
try to
might
encourage
steal an
him
automobile,
plenty nights through texting and sending
facing 10
scriptures to
years
let
in
him know
prison.
that in the Bible,
A
God forgive us
shoplifter
of all our
who,
sins.
After the third offense,
He asked
they're
me
facing 10 years
when
in
I came down
prison.
and visit my family here, if it was,
And I've had my
he
share of
was very
sentencing
sorry
people
about it.
like the
He just couldn't get over the hump of understanding
assailants
that it
who,
has to be, it has to go, he has to forgive himself.
were
I will
convicted
tell you
of
today,
the
Judge,
crimes that
on behalf of my family, we truly, truly, by no means,
there was a case
look at
in
him
this
more
state
than just my
where
landlord.
the amount of
Again, he's my
thievery
family. I
exceeded
rest assured his family has
what's
supported
occurred in
me
this.
tremendously. They didn't ask me to come. They didn't beg me to. I asked them, can I please come? Can I please, every day, what can we do? Because again, like I say, this man took my family in, put a
and
roof
having
over my
complete
head
trust in
with
what
2
that
children.
lawyer,
And he made sure not
says
one
to
day,
them.
if I was late, he overcharged me. Not one day
course,
he made an
part of my
eviction
years of
notice or
practice,
anything,
had
and I've been
clients
late
come
many
to
of
me
times.
with,
Yet he let us stay in the home.
and they come and
He
say
was
that
ready
they didn't know
to
how much
renovate
money
the
they
home
got on
right
their
before my
case if
son
they
was
went to the
graduating.
lawyer's
And I
office
was
and,
working for Department of Social
they were-
Service as
they
an
just
investigator,
asked to sign
not
the
making
check,
much
so they
money.
came
And
to
I
me.
next 3 months until my son
This
graduated.
is totally
He said, you know what, you
unprecedented.
guys
I
stay
cannot-
here, and when he
there's no way.
graduates, then we'll go ahead and
There's
start
a
the
case
renovation of the
in
home.
this state
So I just ask
where we
consideration what I said about this man. Thank you, Your
exceeded
Honor.
what's occurred in this case.
I'm not going to read the statements because you do have letters from Kevin Green, Jay Taylor, and Tom Miller, all who were here earlier but had to go, as I said. But at this
Now,
point,
the,
I would like to address the court.
Okay. The presentations on behalf of Mr. Fleming were certainly inspiring. You know, reminded me of the revival that we had at our church last week.
Your Honor,
Reminded me of
thank you.
funeral
for the
services that
opportunity
I've
address
had to
this court.
attend,
For many years, I stood in
particularly
this very
within the last
courtroom
year.
representing people. Many of those people had broken
I've
the
heard a
law.
lot of testimonies. It's 10 years on the breach of trust with the
They had no criminal history prior to
Pinckneys,
this.
counts 5 and 9, is it?
Yes, sir.
Where the exposure is 5 years, the sentence is 5 years. The 30-day breach of trust, count 6, the sentence is time served. On the conspiracy charge, sentence is 5 years.
Great detail. And Mr.
On
Fleming
the
said it too,
breach
about how he
of
pled guilty in
trust,
federal
where
court with
the
no deals.
exposure is 10 years. The
No
sentence is
deals.
10
And he
years.
talks about how the Pinckneys were considered in the
That sentence will run
pre-sentencing report, which of
consecutive
course the state doesn't have. We don't know what was in
to
that.
the sentence that you're currently serving.
But what he leaves out, when they make this great presentation to you, how they
All the
pled with no
sentences
deals, and
otherwise
therefore
will be
that's enough.
concurrent
Just
with each
let the
other.
feds handle it.
I'm going to
just-
defer
Thumb their nose at
any
the state, thumb their nose at our
restitution
obligations in the agreement
hearings.
we signed,
I
and
believe it's
went down the
just
street. What he
too
leaves out
convoluted
is
for me to get a
said he
true
was allowed
handle
to-
on what the state is seeking and what should be ordered, and I tend to think that it's, well, I don't want to prejudge whether it's necessary or not, but I'm going to defer anything sentenced to consecutive life sentences. Now I have a lawyer, co-defendant, colleague of his, facing 195 years in prison. In addition to dealing with and sentencing all those
You have a
folks,
call from an inmate
I
at
certainly
Adams
dealt with my
County
share
Detention
of
Center.
grand larceny cases.
Somebody died.
Who died?
I met this
Steal
person,
automobile,
the female, I thought it was a female. And then
facing
I
10 years
found
in
out
prison.
on the meeting that it wasn't, and I snapped,
Shoplifter
I
who
swear. It was something that was uncontrollable.
after
I
the
can't
third
explain it. I
offense,
was outside of
facing 10
myself.
years in prison.
It was over before I even knew it started.
And I've had my share of sentencing people like the assailants who were convicted of the crimes that.
On the afternoon of July 17, 2008, the body of 18-year-old Angie Zapata
case
was
in this
discovered by
state
her sister in her
where
Greeley,
the amount of
Colorado
thievery
apartment. Angie, a transgender female, had been viciously beaten to
what's
death,
occurred in this
and the car she'd borrowed from her sister was missing. The case remained a whodunit for 2 weeks until police responding to a noise complaint found the missing car and arrested its occupant, Alan Andrade. Andrade eventually confessed to the crime and was charged with first-degree murder. But the defense would claim
says to them.
provocation, saying Angie...
This morning, police have a suspect in custody in connection with the
Presentations
beating
on
death of a
behalf of
Greeley
Fleming
woman.
were certainly
Investigators say the
inspiring.
man told police he beat the woman after finding out that she used to be a he. They're now
reminded
trying
me
to
of the
determine
revival
whether
that
this
we
should
had
be
at our
considered a
church
hate
last week.
crime.
Angie Zapata
Reminded me of,
was born a biological male. She grew
funeral
up mostly in
services
Fort
that I
Lupton,
had to
Colorado, which is
attend,
about 30 minutes south of Greeley.
particularly within
Angie
the last
Zapata
year.
and Alan Andrade met through this website called Moco Space. They then exchanged
Heard a lot of
cell phone
testimonies,
numbers and
so much so
communicated
that
off and on for a few days before meeting up here in Greeley, Colorado. They had stayed together for a couple days in Angie's apartment.
2 minutes because everyone has so
On
many
that third day,
good
Angie
things
left to go
to say.
babysit her sister's kids. And during that time that she was gone, Alan allegedly started looking around her apartment because he had some suspicions that maybe Angie wasn't being completely honest with him. So when she returned, he questioned Angie whether or not she was female. Angie told him,
0 to
"I'm all
5, the
female."
sentence is 5 years.
Alan, still not believing that, reached out and grabbed Angie in her
I
crotch
wrote
area,
insurance, is that
where
insurance
he
fraud?
discovered what he believed to be a penis.
That is
I think he knew
count
that Angie
number
Zapata was a
or-
male the entire
or
time he was
indictment
there.
number.
Angie Zapata's sister, Monica, would tell us that Angie was very straightforward in telling people
Count
she
11,
met that she was biologically
and
a male because of the dangers
Exposure
involved
is
with
0
that.
to 10,
I
the sentence is
theorized
10
that
years.
Alan Andrade was coping with something, and he
Breach
ultimately
of
lost
trust
it
with the
and
10
murdered her
year
with a fire extinguisher.
possibility or exposure, the sentence is 10 years. On the money laundering, where the exposure, the sentence is 10 years.
The police affidavit was just horrible. It was.
On the 5-year breach of trust,
He
sentence
beat her
is
to
5
death,
years.
and
On the 5-year
partially woke up. She
money
heard some
laundering,
gurgling noise, and he
it's
said, "Well, I'm
5
going to
years.
basically,
And
I'm
on
going
the
to finish her off.
computer
Use a fire extinguisher
crime sentence is
to kill her,
5 years.
to finish her off." Then he stole her purse, a lot of
Each
items
of those
in her
will
car,
run concurrent
and
with
drove
each
away.
other.
There was a noise violation called in to
As
Thornton
to
Police Department. They found Alan
breach of
Andrade
trust
sitting in that
involving
stolen
the
automobile
Pinckneys,
that belonged to Angie's sister
5
Monica,
and counts
and he
5
went into
says 5
custody and
years.
interrogated regarding Angie's murder.
The 30-day
guys,
breach of
I get
trust,
you're
count
from
6, the sentence is time
somewhere from Greeley, right? From Greeley, obviously. I get the car in Thornton. Obviously, something happened. Something's going on.
Conspiracy charge,
Do you know what that is?
sentence is
Heck no.
5 years.
Have you ever lived in
On
Greeley?
the breach
heck no.
of
You
trust,
ever
where
visited
the
Greeley?
exposure is
Never
10
been to Greeley?
years.
Nope.
The sentence is 10 years.
Alan first was very adamant that
sentence
he didn't
will
know
run
anything
from
about Angie.
consecutive
He didn't know anything about the situation.
sentence that you're
After
currently serving.
a lengthy interrogation by a skilled detective, he then finally decided
All
to
the
tell the truth,
sentences
and he
otherwise
told
will
about
run
what happened that
concurrent
night.
with each other. I'm
The
going
charges
to
that are
defer
ultimately
any
filed is first-degree murder after
restitution
deliberation,
hearings. I believe it's
bias-motivated
just
crime, as well
too
as
convoluted for me
vehicle
to
theft
get
and
a true
identity
handle
theft
on
because
what
he
the
used
state is seeking and
Monica's
what
credit
should be
cards
ordered.
at gas stations
I
down
tend
in
to think
Denver.
that it's,
Everyone rise, please.
don't want to
The Honorable
prejudge
Judge
whether it's
Marcella
necessary.
Falco.
The bias-motivated crime statute, which would be akin to a hate crime statute. This was the first time someone had ever been charged under that statute in a homicide case, which was significant because there was interest from all over the country in the case at the time because it was a murder involving a transgender individual. Being the first one to prosecute a case of this nature was a big deal.
Angie's body was found on July 17th, 2008. If you saw Angie before this day, you would have seen a young, vibrant 18-year-old. But she wasn't an ordinary woman, and you all know this by now. Angie was born male, and she was named Justin. Angie's short life ended that day, suddenly, and it was all at the hands of the defendant. What you're gonna know at the end of this case is that this was not a snap decision. It knew for approximately 36 hours that Angie was biologically male. His statements will prove to you that the reason that he did this was because she was transgender. Regardless of who Angie was, ladies and gentlemen, she didn't deserve to die like this. No one deserves to die like this.
This case is not about a judgment of a lifestyle. This case is not about whether Justin Zapata's lifestyle was right or wrong. This case is about a deception and the reaction to that deception. In July of 2008, Alan Andrade met a girl named Angie Zapata. Alan and Angie spent the night together. The next day, Alan and Angie have a conversation, at which point Alan discovers that Angie, this girl that he had met, this girl who he had just spent the last night with, was in fact a man. And Alan snapped.
They were trying to put on a basically gay panic or a trans panic defense, saying that he was tricked, he was duped into not knowing that Angie was transgender.
The gay panic defense is a strategy now outlawed in some parts of this country and the world, where a defense attorney basically blames the victim. And it's the same, she wore a high skirt, that's why she was raped. But this is a calculated strategy that says homophobia is so pervasive in our culture that it's in the jury. And if I use homophobia with the jury, it'll work.
When I got closer to her, I see a spot of blood on her blanket by her head.
Right out of the gate, emotional testimony from family members and friends would take center stage as the prosecution attempted to paint a picture of a young, vibrant girl who was loved and supported by those close to her. The defense tried other tactics, including referring to Angie as him and calling Angie by her birth name, Justin.
Angie was born biologically male, right, Miss Zapata? Yes. Why did you refer to her as Angie?
She felt comfortable. She wanted me to.
Do you know if Angie believes that she was female? A long time ago, to live as Angie Zapata. Angie was allowed to be Angie with her family. Her entire family embraced her. It was clear that Angie thought that she should be a girl, and that Angie then started living that life when she got old enough to do so. Miss Zapata, were you always accepting of Angie's decision to live as a woman?
In the beginning, it wasn't so much accepting. It was more protection. Because I knew people would stare. People would talk about her. And I wanted to protect her from that cruelty. The people that judged her.
There have been anti-trans homicides for years, and increasingly women and people of color, we live in a pretty homophobic culture. This is everywhere, even on the coast. It is not a safe world to be seen as queer or LGBTQ.
That day, we were gonna go shopping because she needed shampoos, and we were gonna discuss because she was gonna come and live with me.
Was that the last time that you ever spoke to your daughter?
Yes.
We made it clear from the prosecution side that that's how she should be referred to. We use that name every time we referred to Angie. We tried to respect her wishes, even in her death, and tried to respect her family, and the defense just did the complete opposite of that.
Do you remember talking to Officer Barber?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and that was on July 17th, 2008?
Yes, ma'am.
You had already learned what happened to to Justin, right?
My sister, yes.
Okay.
Every opportunity the defense had to refer to the victim, they used a male pronoun or referred to him as Justin Zapata, even during examination of witnesses or cross-examination of witnesses.
And you told Officer Barber that you got the text message on the 15th where Justin asked for about $10 for gas money, right?
When my sister asked for $10 in gas money?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that pronoun battle at trial was, it was glaring.
When was the last time that you saw Angie?
The night before she was killed.
What did Angie tell you about
the guy?
What did you think about this when she told you that?
Kind of awkward.
Why?
Because she didn't tell me who the guy was.
Did you think it was weird that she needed to go home and check on this person?
Yes.
The family's testimony at trial was integral. Monica got on the stand, testified as kind of the matriarch in the family of the siblings that Angie was honest with everyone about who she was, and that Alan Andrade knew well before he murdered her that she was transgender.
Did most people close to you, or did people that knew Angie, did they know that he was Justin also?
Yes.
Did you have concerns for her as she got older, acting as a female but being born as Justin? Or living as a female, did you have concerns about that?
Yes.
Okay. Did you discuss your concerns with Angie about that?
I did.
What did you tell her?
I used to tell her to be careful because the world didn't accept her. I said there's certain people that will accept you, Angie, and there's certain people that's not going to accept you.
It was emotional. Both of Angie's sisters were tearful on the stand. They talked about how much they loved her, how much of a kind person she was, how much of a fun-loving person she was. And they were just struck by the fact that she was just brutalized, just beaten to, obviously just beaten to death.
Do you recall July 17th, 2008?
Every day.
And was on that date, was Angie supposed to babysit for you?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what happened that day?
I called her, because my sister was sleeping a lot and forget what time she had to come babysit. I kept calling, and she wouldn't answer. So I started calling her friends. I got this gutty feeling, and I don't know how to explain what a gutty feeling is. Maybe a mother gutty feeling, because so many years that I've taken care of my family, I don't know why I remembered I had her key, and why I had her key, don't know. But I had a key.
You could really see the anguish in Monica's face and feel that same anguish in her testimony of having to come on that scene and find her sister after she's been murdered.
We got to her apartment, and I'm going up the stairs, and I went to turn the key and open the door, and I seen her on the floor with the blanket over her. When I got closer to her, I see that there's a spot on the blanket.
Take your time. There's Kleenex for you.
A spot of blood on her blanket by her head. And I went and picked it up, and the blanket stuck to her face because the blood's dried. And I take the blanket off of her, and my sister's face was swollen, and her face was smashed in.
They took him into custody, and the questioning of him began.
Do you know that individual? No, I've never seen that. I've never seen that picture.
Eventually, he sang like a canary.
Angie Zapata's cause of death was blunt force trauma, and throughout the trial, prosecutors would continue to highlight the sheer brutality of this crime. Perhaps the single biggest piece of evidence that would drive home just how savage it was, pictures and video of the crime scene that were shown to the jurors.
Do you know what that is?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
This is a CD which contains the crime scene video.
And have you watched that?
Yes, I have.
And how do you know that's the one that you watched?
I initialed it and put the date on it when I watched it.
Okay.
I went to at the crime scene, and I did not think this was a heat of passion crime. This was a first-degree murder because of all the evidence at the scene and what we knew about Angie.
What did you find when you arrived on scene?
Initially, when we pulled up, there was 2 women outside, obviously distraught, directing us upstairs towards an apartment. As we peered through the screen door, you could see somebody lying on the ground. As I entered the room, it was a living room. The patient was pulseless, apneic, not breathing. There was a large amount of blood around the patient's head. There appeared to be some sort of trauma to the face that was either blunt or penetrating trauma. There was some deformity towards the face.
This is a photograph taken of the living room of the apartment number 8. This is the victim, Angie Zapata, as she laid on the floor in the living room.
Monica had loaned Angie her car on somewhat of a permanent basis. So that very morning when the body was discovered, Monica realized that her vehicle was not present at the apartment.
When I arrived on scene, I contacted the victim's sister, Monica Murdaugh. She told me that when she went into the apartment to check on her sister, she couldn't locate the car keys to the vehicle that she lets the victim drive. So she believed that whoever did that to her sister also had the vehicle. She told me.
But for those 2 weeks, we were working it like any other homicide case. We were working it from a known perspective of our victim, who our victim was known to associate with, who she was interacting with at that time, just hoping that that vehicle would be contacted or located by law enforcement to help us lead to a potential suspect.
I was dispatched on a loud noise complaint. Upon arrival, as I was driving southbound on Hoffman Way, I could hear a loud stereo coming from a vehicle that I identified as a green PT Cruiser. I then drove into the parking lot towards the vehicle and trained my spotlight on it and called out with the plate. I noticed that there was beer cans laying outside the vehicle, and I noticed that the occupant was in the driver's seat. And I approached the vehicle from the passenger side to see into the car to see what he was doing in there. I noticed he was making rapid movements underneath the seat as if he was reaching for something underneath the seat.
And what did you do at that point?
At that point, fearing that he may be reaching for a weapon, I placed him at gunpoint and ordered him to show his hands.
And as that happened, did you learn any new information?
At the same time as I was giving him the commands, dispatch aired to the other officers who were Greeley.
When I pulled up to the location, I saw a PT Cruiser with the door open. Officer Thomas had his gun out, and as did Officer Stricker. Commands were given. He complied with the commands. He was handcuffed and taken into custody.
We received a call from the Thornton Police Department in very early morning hours, 2 to 3 a.m. So I, in the middle of the night, grabbed my entire case file, which consisted of about two or three boxes of just case notes and binders that we had put together, and I responded down to Thornton.
With regards to People 64, what is that?
This is a DVD of my interview with Mr. Andrade.
Let me show you a picture of somebody here. Do you know that individual? Never seen that person before. Okay.
Of him began. Eventually he sang like a canary.
Is it your vehicle?
No.
Okay, whose vehicle is it?
I have no clue.
This person is the person who owns that PT Cruiser. This person was found dead in Greeley.
Oh, damn.
Alan Andrade was interviewed by Detective Greg Tharp of the Greeley Police Department. While the interview was thorough and methodical, the trial judge ruled that only the first 39 minutes would be admissible in court. That's because Andrade had very subtly invoked his right to remain silent. But what was played for the jury showed a man who seemed to think he could get away with murder, tripping on his own lies.
You're just here on a warrant, is that right? Just an unpaid traffic ticket or something that you have? All right, no problem then with that. Let me ask you real quick, have you been the victim of any crime tonight or in recent weeks here? Nobody's harmed you, nobody's victimized you in any way?
No.
Okay.
Like in any interview, the strategy begins with trying to establish a very quick rapport in an introduction in a very non-confrontational manner in hopes that he's only going to waive Miranda rights since he's in custody here on this warrant. Obviously, the one thing that I'm not going to confront him with right off the bat is the homicide. So we talk a little bit about the car.
Can you tell me a little bit about this car that you were in tonight that Thornton? Is it your vehicle?
No.
Okay, whose vehicle is it?
I have no clue who it is.
Okay, how did you get it?
I acquired it. How I acquired it? Pretty much dumb, bad luck, I guess you can call it now. I was walking around the neighborhood. I got a bad habit from, when I'm younger, looking at vehicles, bad habit. I used to look in them, whatever. Anyway, I do that. Come across keys, a dumbass me figures, oh, well, it's a cooler to ride 2-3 days, has some gas in it, so I take it.
So you got into the car just looking to do an auto prowl, or money or whatever might be left behind in it?
This is somebody who's been down this road before, maybe not at this level, but certainly has been on the other side of a... So he didn't appear scared. A valiant effort to take his involvement, wrong place, wrong time, kind of, damn my bad luck was kind of his approach to this.
Let me show you a picture of somebody here. Do you know that individual? Never seen that person before. Okay. You need to look at it a little.
When Andrade said, "I'm done," at a hearing, that's him invoking his right to remain silent, which we argued about, obviously, but the judge found that way, so we had to use the 39 minutes we had.
I took it more as he's done. He can't hold off the lies any longer. From that point on, with continued questioning of his involvement, he goes and gives us a full confession of his involvement. The court rules that that point was thrown out, was inadmissible. The jail call